Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. You could come near your seat and still eat at the same time.
Hey, the click over there?
Yep. Do like a new cows.
I know. I know it's warm over there. That's why everybody's hanging out.
We're issuing demerits. Time out. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. I think we'll be able to get to the second part pretty quickly because some of it's repetitive. Does anyone really need a debrief from the previous session?
I think for the audience members that came, yeah.
Okay, for the people who came as we were finishing, this is a quick debrief. We came, we saw, we conquered. And so that's pretty much it. Anyone want to add anything?
Well, first of all, for those, yes, me, I have a big mouth. For those of you who came, AE handed out a document that I want to make sure that any other committee members that came in late. Mickey, where are you?
And I'm afraid there's not enough copies.
Yep, there is.
Oh, did you get some? There's some more.
There's some more over here. So, Mickey, here you go. This is for future discussion and on the table. And I think it's fair to say it's a compilation of a series of ideas, but I think, Drew, it's not a consensus document. It's just compilation of people's. Right, I know it's your opinion, but AE got up, so I'm not looking for her.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just taking water.
That's all right, no problem. AE, you want to give the 2 minutes on this piece of paper that was handed out?
Sure. This is. Oops, sorry. This is basically a summary of notes from a conversation that happened on December 12th, the 15th, among the folks that were originally brought on, appointed as resident representatives from the three neighborhoods, Globeville, Larry, and Swansea, in an effort to coalesce. John Sapien and I were motivated to do our best to convene something like this after 2C1s so that we'd be talking together and move things forward. John was unfortunately ill, wasn't able to make it, and then there's other conversations that have gone on around some of the issues that are now kind of put into a centralized list, and these are things that were taken from notes in that conversation, and I'm absolutely fine with it was trying to put it in a friendly way by saying it's a consensus document, which may not be an appropriate use of the word, but it is a document that contains a bunch of ideas out there that hopefully will put the neighborhood, be part of discussing putting the neighborhood constituency in the strongest possible position going forward, and working with the ideas around evaluating what has and hasn't worked and that kind of a thing. So it's all part of the conversation. And there's things on there that are general discussion too that have been floating around that are kind of linked. They're also.
Yep. So I'll make sure everybody's got it.
We also discussed membership.
Yeah, we also discussed membership, and I think to make it quick and easy, we went through the roster. We are going to put out, I think, a combination of word of mouth, events, or whatever. The residents came up with, or suggested, so John, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that there needs to be a more aggressive approach to putting more residents on this committee, particularly with focus on Elyria and Swansea, to be able to do that. We will put it out in the roundup. Also, other people who may be interested to be on the committee. We don't have a formal process at this point. We do need to write up some thoughts about what it takes to be on the committee, etc. But I think the first order of business is to put out word of mouth and for residents to see if more residents can be added to the committee. Is that a fair statement?
And it was reinforced, and I don't know, Bert, if you want to state it, how helpful it is and important for people to attend the meeting, our meetings, the NWC-CAC, which are open meetings, to assess if they want to be, if it's, really a good match for them. It's not just everybody come and sign up and get on the committee.
Yeah, I just mentioned that, I sat in the sidelines for a number of months before, I figured that I could possibly be a help to the committee. And I think anyone that would be interested in doing it, I would suggest the same thing. Come in, sit in on some of the meetings, see if there's something like this fits your needs or fits something that you want to be involved in, rather than just bringing people in and defining find out it doesn't work for them, and then they just don't show up. It's a waste of everybody's time. So, you know, I think that was the way I wound up coming into the organization, and I would suggest that, you know, they continue with that same type of structure of bringing people back.
And Hayes done it the same way. It's gonna be a process.
Right.
You can't say, oh yeah, well, you can do it once.
So then, the big discussion that happened in the workshop is CSU had asked for time to go through their proposed building. Jocelyn, do you want to do a quick recap?
Talk, not speak with my mouth full. So we did a good discussion about what the Water Resources Center might be and provide, particularly sort of in the ground floor area. That would be a space that might connect more with community needs. So we'll be, our architect, Pierre Hogestad, who is here, will take those recommendations and kind of digest them and put them together with other thoughts we've got from faculty up on campus, and we'll circle back with you at the next CAC with an update on the process with that. Just a reminder that it's a program. Right now we're looking at just programs, so what will the building do in sort of general sizes and types of spaces. But then the design process for that building will be down the road a ways. So there'll be a lot more opportunity for us to have a more in-depth conversation on that building.
And we'll see this again in January, right? So we'll come back in January.
We will come back in January with an update, yes.
Okay.
And then Kelly Lee gave an update on the NWC work plan and shared some news with us regarding that he's going to be coming full-time over to this project, and that there'll be a new NDCC person. And I think that's pretty much it from the previous meeting. Reader's Digest version. Does anyone have anything else to add to the update?
Yeah, do we have extra copies of Kelly's work plan, Eric?
I think there's some of Alice this morning.
So, Nikki, and for those of you who weren't here earlier, there's extra copies of the work plan.
And I'll go through those when we get to 2016 work plan update. I'll go through those.
Okay, great.
Point.
All right. Yeah.
I want to emphasize and re-emphasize that the CSU water facility needs to be the most magnificent building on site. If it exceeds the zoning code for height, then we seek a variance. But it's got to be capped with a beautiful, beautiful observation deck. And I want to re-emphasize that, and we'll go out and work as hard as we did on the past election to get that done.
Thanks, John.
The committee reports. We'll start with the EOC and Drew.
Okay. I said this before. I kind of feel that reporting on that committee is probably better done as far as the content of it done by the main participants, namely Eric and Barb is here. Eric is here. There's the main highlights. I don't know if you guys are going to. Sorry, I was a little unprepared, Terrence. You know, I think that they talked about planned acquisition. They went into some of the details, how that's going on. Barb talked about historic assessment for the maybe 3 buildings on the campus and the ways they're strategizing to do that. And Eric talked about rail consolidation and how complicated that is and how that involves a lot of the history. So I think, Eric, if you want to talk, if you're going to talk about that, I think that's could be very interesting how the rails were intertwined and integral to the whole development of this National Western. And I think some of that, the history that can come out of that could be very interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll talk about that. There's a parking management study coming up that I think the community really needs to be involved in. Very much, you know, I think that will be something we have to really stay on top of. The same with the public realm study. You know, is how these spaces on the campus will serve the community. not just local response, but the whole city and any visitors that there might be. Then there was quite a very interesting next generation economic study that a lot of it was really over my head, but I think that some of the potential on this campus is not, we don't even really realize yet what could happen as far as new technologies, new industries, new startups, and the integration of science and industry. I find this to be one of the most compelling parts of this whole master plan. And that was that's kind of a summary of what I was basically a listener today, but.
Great, and just so you all know, we're posting on the National Western Citizens Advisory Committee website, we are posting the EOC minutes.
We'll also have those on the NWC-CAC website beginning of the year. So everything will be, the agendas and meeting minutes will also be listed there for easy access.
CFAS, the Capital Funding Alignment, Armando's not here.
Armando's not here.
I'm not sure, have they had the committee?
Yeah, they did. And I think that's the most significant piece is that the city is moving forward. An RFP is out, and it's due actually next week. That the city is moving forward to acquiring underwriters for the purposes of floating the first tranche of financing, which is, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's up to $225 million.
I mean, the number, sure. I heard between 150 and 200, but it could be as high
It
as
says as high as 225, up to $225 million, so that obviously they need the money for the land acquisition. Keep in mind also, I want to underscore, this also includes parts of the components of the Colorado Convention Center, so it's not just all going to here, because they're going to need some needs in the Convention Center. Other than that, I don't think there was anything else major that they're committed to.
Okay, EPAS, the Event Programming Advisory Subcommittee.
And Ed's also here. So.
Oh, no, oh, hey, Ed, Ed's here.
Where's that? Hi. What was the exact date of that? Does anybody remember? If people care, I'm sorry, I didn't make a note of it, but anyway, it just happened. So the Events Programming Advisory Subcommittee met, and it was the first time that most of the people in the room that had been invited to the table had a chance to meet each other. So there was an introductory part of it, just kind of seeing what people's affiliations were and their interests, and it was a really good, friendly, creative conversation. There was a discussion of some of the most important things that were discussed in terms of content. Were the definition of what partnerships are. We need to clarify that. This is partly where the EPAS is going to be very active. How do you affiliate with partners? What are the obligations? What are the transactions? And what are the standards that have to be met relative to what constitutes a solid, bona fide, best practices, enlightened, innovative, whatever NWC program. So that'll be an ongoing conversation. There was a conversation about broadening the goal, the stated goal of the EPAS, and I want my peers on here to understand what, because I want it to be looped in here to the NWC-CAC, some of what my convictions are, and I'm stating them as concerns for having a broader view of the initial goal of the EPAS, which is emphasize the venues and using the venues that are coming for events and this very important sort of macro programming that's critical. I feel that there is a more motion toward recognizing that there is programming going on right now, things like the CSU Soils Health Awareness Program, conversations about the marketplace, conversations such as CSU's brought tonight with conversations about the pro water building, that kind of a thing, because we don't necessarily have to wait for all the venues to be built to get out there and start, having things happen, and those can inform the content as we go forward. And so that became part of the conversation. I'm very happy about that. And also, as we go forward, one of the first timelines that's been generated is a timeline having to do with the health awareness, the soil health awareness that's being worked on, the strategics around community engagement, and there will be more of those coming out for us to talk about here in terms of programming we can get going on. And then as we move into these arenas like the education, science, industry, informal and formal education, lifelong learning, and all those kinds of things, those will lead into content with the events. It'll lead into how public and private partnerships are determined. So there's a lot of innovation and strategies that go into the events programming and advisory subcommittee that can be activated on our way to building these great venues. So I'm going to ask this group to recognize the influence and richness of ideas that can originate here at the NWC-CAC from all over, and I want you to challenge me to help you get those into the governance process for conversation. Because what goes on here goes into the EPAS and it goes into the Executive Oversight Committee and it becomes very real. So, and I did meet with Ed afterwards and we had a great conversation about some great, excellent reinforcement ideas he has in the design of the structure of the lines of inquiry and the content of programming and the relationships between the members of the community to get Global Learning Swansea more fully engaged in all elements of it. And anything you want to add is great.
Mr. Nichols.
This was the first meeting of the partnership of the idea of the planning subcommittee. And it was really to set a formula for how it's going to move forward. There were conversations about who are partners and what level of partnerships there are. The overall mission of what the subcommittee is going to do and the actual written operative language about it is it's a diverse set of partners and partnerships to drive year-round campus and adjoining neighborhood activity. And I think that's important because everything that takes place here is going to involve the community. There are different levels of partners. The partners we're talking about include the community partners, and that group recognizes organizations, clubs, associations, and groups that will be meeting on a less formal basis. But it could be, an example could be schools, and on an intermittent basis that they could come in. Content partners are organizations that are aligning content that can add to either the educational experience or the historical experience of what's going on there. An example of that might be Grow House or something of that nature. Program partners, and this is where we get into partners that are more of a long-term and financial investment, represent organizations that intend to develop shared programming as a partnership with the National Western Center in one way or another, and they look at a financial commitment for those types of partners going forward. These are some of the people that are going to be brought to the table early on, such as Denver Botanic Gardens, the zoo, other organizations, somebody like Rodeo Hall of Fame, for example. These are people that would be looking to make a more long-term and financial commitment. And then you've got the very big partner activities, the legacy partners, organizations that are going to make a real long-term and substantial financial investment in the center and what goes on in terms of some of the long-standing, this could be, but wouldn't be required to be, examples of major sponsorships or exhibits requiring support facility needs, where they're going to look at a renewable or a requirement for a continuing portion of a physical facility. And then you've got the founding partners, including obviously not only National Western, but the city, and then CSU, and where Jocelyn go? Well, she disappeared. There she is over there. CSU, History Colorado, and as we go forward, it's in the National Western, DMNS. It's going to be a series of different types of arrangements. There's going to be what I call tactical and short-term programs, and those could be a fill-in for a one-time event or a local event. And then there'll be more of the long-term planning events and arranging of what's going to go on 2 to 5 years from now, what kinds of repeat events will take place, and what those will entail in terms of making recommendations up to the executive committee for types of commitments. As AE said, she and I met and we talked about how does the community stay involved in this, and the community will be represented on the EPAS, on the planning subcommittee, as well as we will keep all notification of planning events will be brought up at these meetings and through the community communication. So I think it'll be planning of different types of partners, different events over different time scales. It'll start with short-term events, but it'll be looking at, it's not a scheduling group, it's a group that's looking at and helping plan the types of events that can take place.
Questions?
Question. Are you, maybe it's too early, are you planning either a grand finale event or a grand opening event? Or are you even there yet?
I think it's too early. As we look at that, I think as a whole series of steps unfolds, and we are a long way from being at even, I don't know if there is a specific date for an opening event, or a groundbreaking event, but those are the sorts of things that as those are calendared, we will plan and we will look at the events that go on around those significant.
Because I think the CSU facility would be.
The water facility, we have a meeting there, but you're looking at, what, 2018-ish by the time, and Jocelyn just left, so I can't verify that, but in that time frame. So as we look at that kind of event, yeah, that's going to be the sort of thing that will really,
Great.
it'll set the table and schedule for events.
Just one addendum to that. Everybody is encouraged, no matter what you think is realistic or not, if you have any ideas for events or whatever, put it in my voicemail, drop Ed or me a note. Let's get the creative juices going. It has been suggested that maybe the stock show is doing a free thank you to Denver for the free rodeo tickets after 2C, which is an NWC link thing. The idea came up to do a groundbreaking on Benny Cram Drive too, as another possibility, just as a more preliminary thing. So there's things that just, if you have any ideas, we can activate the awareness and the buy-in and help demonstrating the benefits of this to the neighborhoods pretty quickly as we go forward.
But I think the other thing that's important to that is the fact that there will be events going on in the neighborhood that don't involve the planning subcommittee for the National Western Center. It doesn't stop things from going on. It's not a yes-no committee saying, yes, you can do this, no, you can't. The communities can do events and will continue to do events around and supporting and in alignment. This is looking at more the types of events that this committee will report to the executive committee, and it'll carry forward ideas that are looking at a long-term life.
Is there anything else on EPAS? Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, David.
Oh, David.
I was gonna ask you, that the committees, do we share with the convention center? How does that work? I mean, are you gonna go after events that, let's say, Mecum Auto Auction was here?
Convention Center will sit on the committee, so there will be a constant communication. There will be events where, for example, auto show might well, as the facilities unfold and become available here, those events can shift. But in the meantime, there will be a constant conversation with the convention center. Visit Denver. We'll have seats. We'll be in conversation with them on a continuing basis.
And that was really the purpose of having the National Western Center and the Convention Center on the ballot initiative together to make sure that we're thinking strategically about these types of events so that our facilities aren't competing against one another for events, but so that we can attract really new events and really raise the profile of events in the city.
That would include the beer festival.
Is that what you want? You want to move down here, right? It's convenient.
Also, from within the neighborhoods too, Scharf, say his name?
Richard.
Richard Scharf. I talked to Richard a little bit about, you know what, we could easily get the concept of a field trip down to the convention center with linked events with the neighborhoods already now. We can help begin a bigger relationship between the neighborhoods understanding the convention center. So there's also some areas where we can start building that relationship now too, as a link as we move into the bigger venues and the long-term builds and that kind of thing. So there's ideas that we can enrich it with.
All right. Anything else? Mr. Eric, you're up.
Okay, so Kelly went through a bunch of this. I'll try to be brief. But 2016 will be a very, very busy year. We don't have money to play with, so we can actually start doing big things. So there's a lot of parallel tracks. Does everyone have a copy of this? I don't know if you have one. About it. But this this is the list of.
Excuse me, I ended up with two somehow, so if somebody doesn't.
Okay, so does anybody else need one? Okay. So these are a lot of the big building blocks that we're going to be activating over the next couple of years. And there's a number of parallel tracks. So we have, as we've talked about ad nauseum, but our critical path elements, land acquisition. So there's all the activities related to land acquisition. And 2016 is really when we kick all of those off, starting with the land acquisition ordinance, and then the process of acquiring, negotiating and acquiring the properties, which also activates all of the remediation and demolition that has to happen as we acquire properties. We clean up the buildings, demolish those buildings, and prepare the site. So we'll be doing those individually with each one of the properties. On the rail consolidation part, I talked about that at EOC today, but we've really launched that in earnest as well. We have our team on board. And 2016 is when we really start honing in on what our strategy is going to be for consolidating the railroads on the campus. And then we write the scope of work for the design RFP. Then we actually design the consolidated rail, build the consolidated rail, and abandon the existing rail. So not all of that is going to happen in 2016, but we start that process, and we think that'll hopefully be optimistically a 3-year process.
Excuse me, how many?
Probably I would say at a minimum a 3-year process to consolidate the rail. Glacial pace is fast for a railroad company, so we're going to try and move it along as quickly as possible. But the proof will be in the pudding on that. On the regeneration side, so all of our sustainability goals, that's our net zero energy, waste, and water goals. We actually launched about 3 months ago. We launched what I call our 20,000-foot view study, which is to start to really understand what are the technologies that we're going to pursue on the campus to achieve those net zero energy, waste, and water goals at full build out. And 2016 will be the year where we hopefully procure our next step study, which is taking that 20,000-foot view, that strategy, and actually filling in all the details of those building blocks, of those technologies that we're going to utilize, whether it's heat capture off of the Delgany Interceptor, which we're working with Denver's Metro Wastewater Division, whether it's solar, wind, et cetera, for energy generation on campus, whether it's recycling and reusing all the waste that's generated by the stock show, by all the livestock and by the horses during equestrian events. So all of those various strategies and technologies, 2016 is when we'll hopefully launch our next step study where we really start to dig into the numbers and the feasibility of all of those various technologies that we will hopefully utilize to achieve those goals. Yes.
CSU is doing that now, are they not?
So we're working, so we have a team of 3 of us. It's me, it's myself, Celia Vanderloop is at the city, and Jocelyn. The 3 of us are leading the regeneration effort. And we engaged a firm named Putman Infrastructure, who we partnered with the Natural Resource Defense Council, and they're actually paying for Putman to do the work. And Putman is doing this 20,000-foot view study for us. But the next step will be funded by the city. That next step study will be funded by the city. Program and project management. So now that we, as Kelly discussed, we've The mayor has committed to the leadership team that we put forward. He committed to that on Friday. So now our next step will be to develop the team of support around us, the program management team and the project management team that will help us both manage the bond initiative. We have a rather large bond initiative that we have to manage, and we have to make sure that we have the proper reporting and tracking systems in place. And then on the project management side, I'm going to need a lot of help, and so we're going to bring in project management support to help with the actual activation of the project. So we'll be launching that RFP hopefully in the first quarter of 2016. Barb will talk about the history, the ongoing effort regarding the documentation of the history of the campus. Parking management study, I agree entirely with Drew. This is a very, very important study for the community to be involved in, absolutely. This is the study where we dig into the number of parking spots that will be on the campus, and where we look beyond just parking, but look at multimodal strategies for how we're going to bring people to the campus so that they don't have to bring their cars. And are there opportunities for circulator systems that could be more regional in nature beyond just the National Western Center? So there's a lot that will happen in this study, and there's a public engagement, important public engagement component to that study. We're starting that process by documenting, by really counting cars this year at National Western, similar to what we did last year. But beyond just counting the cars that come to National Western, we're going to be counting cars that go to the remote lots as well. So how many people are coming in and out of Coors Field parking? How many are going in and out of Dick's Sporting Goods Park? How many are really using the National Western's circulators, the circulators that National Western has for all of their parking lots? And then also looking at who else in the neighborhood is renting out their parking lots during stock show. We know that there are a lot of parking lots up and down Brighton Boulevard and east of the city where folks are renting out their parking lot and selling spots so people can get to the stock show. So we're gonna try and do an accounting of that as well this year at stock show, so we can really get a really full picture of how everybody is getting to the stock show. Yes, Noel?
Are you going to look at overall needs, transit needs in the neighborhood?
So what do you mean by overall needs? Because we're going to be focused, for the parking management study, it's going to be focused on the operations of the stock show, or I should say of the National Western Center campus. But what specifically are you thinking about?
I mean, do you think there could be any connection between transit to the stock show and needs of the neighborhood for improvements in transit?
So that's a good question. They will be, as part of the whole the whole look at multimodal strategies, there will be an assessment of how, for example, the North Metro line will serve not just National Western Center, but will serve the broader community, and I guess how will National Western Center impact that use as it relates to the overall community? Meaning, are we going to be sucking up all of the utility out of the North Metro line, and will that potentially impact the neighborhoods around? There isn't specifically components in the study to look at centers of transportation outside of the boundaries of the National Western Center, though. We haven't included that.
There's an element of that, though, that we need to bring back on the table from earlier NWC discussions when we were writing the DRCOG application, which this is partly funded by, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if we should consider, there has been discussion about, in the beginning when we approached DRCOG and had the conversations, there was conversation being concerned about the traffic impact, not just the parking, but the overall impact of the traffic on the neighborhoods and the entire quality of life and that kind of thing, including these sorts of things. And there are conversations about, can the National Western Center help leverage for loop or circulator buses? I mean, this is on the table, and we've specifically asked.
Yes. So let me.
Okay. Well, let me just finish the sentence here, and we're together on it totally. We asked, and when we were talking about DRCOG's application, we wanted to be involved as the NWC and from within the residential area as help with scoping the study to make sure that that sort of thing is included. So somehow we have to keep
Yes.
bringing that out.
Let me interject something here.
Yeah.
Not somehow. It needs to be done.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, we'll
because-
bring the scope. We have a draft scope, and that is right now running around internally at the city, and we will bring that draft scope to the CAC for your input as well. And sorry, I know I got stuck kind of on thinking about trains and buses. As it relates to overall traffic, absolutely. I mean, it's really important. We're very focused on the importance of making sure that the traffic that is generated by the National Western Center doesn't bleed into the overall neighborhoods. And I mean, that's critical to make sure that the main arterial lines, the arterial roads that we have around the National Western Center can support our activity, and that it doesn't create undue burden on the neighborhoods.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's fine, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, for the other 340-some days, when the National Western is not active, the neighborhood is still here. And this should be as part of one of the neighborhood benefit composites of the National Western in relationship to the neighborhoods around it.
It is.
Well, if AE does her job right,
Well, then we
the
better
center's
figure
going to be
out
busy
how to-
365 days a year.
Well,
No, but I think this is a good step for the national stock show people to take and do some leadership there. The city hasn't done it. RTD hasn't done a very good job about it.
But John, a specific example of that might be Washington Street.
I don't care where it's at.
About
Washington Street,
it's pretty clear that the National Western's gonna get over there and connect, that's where they stop. And what we need to get at is how we get the city to prioritize the money to design Washington.
And that's happening, I think, right now.
No, it's not.
well,
Yeah,
It might
Barb,
be
when
in
is?
2018, maybe, what I was told on the phone yesterday.
Oh, okay. I mean, they're working. There's a couple things that are happening. One, there is a, and this is a little bit far afield from this specific study, but there is a master transportation plan that's being done right now for the overall NDCC area, and that includes Elyria, Swansea, Globeville, et cetera. And
But I
Emily
asked a
Glockner.
specific question as to what was happening with this conceptual design. The results of the ULI CAP that was held in August have not even been published yet. Once the ULI CAP on Washington is published, then the next step will be with conceptual design. That's not supposed to be happening until June of next year.
Okay.
So it's sort of very slowly moving, in my opinion, for the fact you're going to have all this traffic dumping onto Washington, hopefully in 3 or 4 years.
So it'll probably be 6 to 7 years before the traffic is dumping on Washington. The overall, or I shouldn't say dumping on Washington, before the overall, the first two phases of the project
When
are,
does the CSU Water Resource Center supposed to open?
it's probably around 2020.
2020?
Yeah.
And that's the first facility to open?
Yes, one of the first few facilities to
True.
open.
So Eric, you mentioned this transportation study, you said it's underway?
No.
Or it's not?
No, the scope is in development.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the same time, January 15th, we apparently have the EIS, the final EIS for I-70 coming out, which could not possibly be informed by this transportation study that's still, I mean, so I guess my concern is I hesitate even bringing I-70 into these discussions, but it really, somehow these whole discussions always dilate, and I think it's great to do a transportation study, but it sounds like the I-70 East project is a foregone conclusion that couldn't be informed by this transportation study that, you know, you say it hasn't begun yet. So it'll be, you know, once again, I-70 is driving everything in these neighborhoods.
You know, it's
Just sort of
delayed
just-
for another 6 months.
The final EIS has been delayed for 6 months?
No,
The
the
RFP,
the
draft-
procurement
the next RFP
RFP
is with the-
is now not going to go out until January of 2017.
Barb, do you have something?
Well, I'm thinking it might make sense to have Emily come to a future meeting and
Yeah,
talk through
absolutely.
a lot of this.
tell people who Emily is.
So Emily Glockner is the transportation engineer at the city who's managing this particular study. And she speaks a lot more intelligently about it than I do. I apologize for that. But we can certainly we can certainly bring Emily in to talk more in depth about the scope.
The reason, Eric, I bring this up is because I think the impacts of the I-70 project, I mean, particularly like at the Bryant Boulevard exit, we've expressed deep concerns about how that's going to work and how it works for the National Western and how it works in Elyria and Bryant Boulevard. And I don't know, I just don't, I'm very concerned that that's really going to work. Having taken out some exits already, you know, the Josephine, and now we've got 10 lanes of traffic instead of the existing 6. And it's just, you know, transportation in Canton is huge. I mean, I guess I don't have a question, I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I wish I could respond to that, but I have absolutely nothing to do with the I-70 project.
To be clear on both the points that Drew's bringing up and what John has brought up, it was my understanding with Dr. CAC that we're doing, what you're talking about, that it was to study the 365-year day. I know I screwed up. 365-year capacity of the optimum capacity of the National Western project as a whole. This is not a stock show study. Yeah. This is a National Western Center year-round impact study. And there was conversation in the end when we were doing the Dr. Talk about can we link it to the studies with the the I-70 East traffic impacts. I mean, it was on the table as something that should be linked. That was part of having the conversation. I don't know how that is linked, whether it's made a point. I mean, the public hearings for I think have been announced in February for the CDOT thing.
So apparently there is no link.
Well, but what I'm saying, Drew, is one of the ways we create the link is by inserting ourselves in the studies and as part of our public voice. I mean, it's not.
And before we draw conclusions, Drew, let's have Emily. Let's have Emily.
Yeah, I think Emily
have this conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's our pressures that kind of create the link.
One of the things the study, and I'm glad that you spoke partially to that. Mm-hmm. In about a month, reality will set in, and traffic will be traffic as it was last year during stock show and every year before that. So study what you might, but take a look at reality when it happens, please, because that's, and I'm glad that you're going to be looking at the
yeah, and we're also doing car counts on the roads at specific
because,
intersections.
You know, it's something that happens, and it happens every year for a 2-week period of time, and that's one of the not so good benefits that the neighborhood has to deal with. So, fair play. Let's talk about neighborhood transportation year-round and make sure that's inserted in that study, because if we can put up with the damn traffic for the National Western as we have in years past, it's some payback time, you know, and it's time. One more thing.
Yes.
Are you, and I didn't see it here, but the parking structure, the proposed parking structure?
At 49th and Brighton?
Yeah, that's not included in this?
Well, that's part of the larger view of larger look at parking in general, meaning figuring out exactly how many spots do we need to have on campus. So yes.
This probably has been talked about, but are you doing anything with economic opportunity for neighbors? Because, you know, folks have used parking as a way to make a little money. Is that a piece of the parking study at all?
I mean, more specifically, what are you thinking about?
Like, people park, you know, in their driveways and their different, you know, to make a little bit of money during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be part of the picture in continuing economic opportunity for the neighbors to be able to benefit from the parking?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that I mean, there's no reason why folks wouldn't continue to be able to do exactly that. I can talk with Emily about whether, and the only thing I think of is that they would rove the community and see who's actually doing it, so they can get a sense of the count of the number of cars that are being parked in the neighborhood, that folks are parking in their driveways. But I don't know what type of study might be done to, are you thinking to increase that potential economic benefit to folks?
Possibly, sure.
I mean, unless people are willing to build a parking garage on their property, I don't know how else we might be able to look further at that.
So I think it's important that you understand it, so you need to know how many people are doing it, how much money they're making. If you provide all the parking in the world, will there be an economic loss to this community?
Sure.
All those issues around it.
One thing I can certainly tell you is that we will never be able to provide all of the parking that the stock show would specifically need. I think their number was somewhere closer to 20,000 at peak cars, and we're looking at a number that's a little bit north of half of that. So I think that one thing that's clear is that our goal is to provide as little parking as possible while still protecting the neighborhoods from infiltration of parking. So I think it would probably be similar. The circumstances for the neighborhood, probably our goal is that they wouldn't change. Meaning if folks want to bring cars into parks so that they can make a little bit of extra money, I don't think that there's anything that would come out of our study that would preclude that. Our goal would be to protect the neighbors from the unwanted impacts of parking in National Western, but not necessarily to prohibit the positive economic impacts that people are enjoying currently. Yes, Steve.
Early on, when we started, there was conversations about parking garages in Glowville, possibly on 51st and Washington, or maybe the Sarko site. We kind of squawked about it and they dropped the conversation. Is that conversation coming back? I mean, we have Wright Boulevard, but what about Washington? What about 51st and Washington? Because they were pretty sure they were going to put one there, and they weren't.
Yeah. There is not, we don't plan on, what we have in the National Western Center master plan is our area of study. So Brighton Boulevard is discussed because Brighton Boulevard is within the boundaries of National Western Center, but Washington is far afield. Washington is outside the boundaries. So we have no intention of doing, of us driving any construction or development outside those boundaries. If private developers look to do something like that, then that's a whole different story. But that's not on the agenda for the National Western Center partners. So essentially, the Platte River, beyond the two bridges that cross the Platte River, 49th and 51st, we're not stepping beyond the Platte River.
As you talk about the study that you're doing and how it encompasses everything, I guess I'm a little confused because now you're saying that none of this study goes beyond the west side of the river.
Not that the study doesn't look, just that we're not planning on building anything west of the river.
But let's take that a step further then. Does your study encompass the development site of the old Sarko property? Because there's going to be a lot of asphalt there.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, that's not, it's only within the realm of the study if they want to provide parking during stock show, and that as private developers, it's their right to utilize that space for parking if they want to, then it's it's information that we would be provided, but we don't intend on making any recommendations for parking structures outside of the National Western Center boundary.
So you're saying that you guys go around the neighborhood and you look for people that are parking in their backyards and their front lawns and whatever, but here you've got a massive development site where there possibly could be parking, and you're saying you're not going to talk to them about
No, I'm saying we probably would talk to them to find out what they're doing, but that it's not upon us to drive or
No, I get that.
recommend
You
their
say, are you
development.
interested in doing it? So I guess, but is that part of your study?
I mean, sure, it's part of our study to understand all of the parking options that exist or may exist to support the National Western Center. And if folks are planning on building something, then we'll certainly want to find out about it.
I mean, they're building it now.
Right.
But the point that I'm asking is you have this here, so how do you figure that out to make it a part of your study or not a part of your study?
So I'll let Emily answer that one because she's a transportation engineer. So we'll bring Emily out to discuss that specifically. Because
one thing further, if I could interject, I don't know if Chairman Crowe would do, but we looked last year potentially doing some short-term parking in part of our land at 51st and Pearl. And we decided to stay out of it. We don't want the people over there tying up all of our truck movements. And pretty quickly you get a bunch of people parking incorrectly on there and all of our truck companies would be very upset. So we decided a little bit of revenue wasn't worth the potential hassle to our truck limits. And I would really doubt the Tremont Road would have people parking in there, but they might.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, if you're going to study everything.
We need to study, I agree, that we need to include it in the study.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense. Absolutely. So we'll make sure to bring, I'd like to move on, we'll make sure to bring Emily out to specifically discuss the scope and to bring the scope to you, to the CAC for comments. I mean, it's absolutely, it's important and it's part of the process.
I do want to reinforce us making a distinction here that I think is responsive to a lot of this discussion, and it's the reason I asked Kelly in the previous session a question that he admittedly did not understand, which when he announced he was being moved fully into NWC work, but the NDCC would continue. We do have a mandate for the neighborhood plans, the interior neighborhood traffic and parking to be part of the city planning process. And we do have a scoped National Western Center impact study going on here that I think you're emphasizing more. And we also are, because you're here reporting to the NWC about a National Western Center study that is being commissioned and that we helped get the money for. But we also have the accountabilities for all of these issues we're all talking about, and that's what part of the neighborhood planning process is, and the larger relationship, and leveraging things for not just Washington Street, which is in Globeville, but all of the interior of Globeville, and leveraging programming money for our park systems over there with the NWC. So I just want to say that I think we need to be careful not to burden just the NWC DRCOG study, but to make it accountable to the larger context of what's going on, because all of these issues do have to be studied simultaneously, including I-70. That's what the NDCC is. These 6 projects, they are connected in the accountabilities through this process. So, you know, that's when we see this scope, this is going to be really helpful, and we'll be able to come back to this conversation and expand all these links. So it's all good stuff. All right.
Okay, so next, and I'll finish these up quickly. So building program refinement, we have a master plan that's at a 3% design. We have big block buildings in that design. We need to take the time to dig into them further and to really start vetting what's in the master plan and figuring out what did we forget, what did we miss, what do we need to change, what do we need to add, etc. So that when we hand over the program to the designers, they have a complete building program. They have something that they can actually draw off of and not have to go through another programming process with expensive architects in the process. So lastly, 1909 Stadium Arena Study. So while it's outside of Phase 1 and Phase 2 of National Western Center, we are starting a process that Barb is leading to really analyze and vet the opportunities that exist with the redevelopment of the 1909 Stadium Arena, looking at historic renovation of that building, potential reuse as a public market, selling Colorado goods and wares. We're going to launch kind of a 2-part study that has both that economic analysis as well as the historic structural assessment to really analyze whether that's our vision for that building is feasible, and if it isn't, what are alternatives for that building. Yes.
I noticed you left out public realm design.
Oh, sorry, I
And
missed
I
that.
think,
Yeah, public realm actually, thank you. Public realm is actually probably one of the most important and culminating studies that we're going to be doing. It takes all the information that's generated from the comprehensive history that we're doing, from our next step study on regeneration, all of the information developed through the parking management study, and it is where we take all of that, as well as, and I should add, what we develop out of our program refinement, as well as our economic feasibility study for the National Western Center. It takes all of that information and looks at that and says, okay, now how do we take this and how do we design a cohesive campus that meets all of those goals, all of the economic goals, all of the parking requirements, circulation requirements, how do we interpret the history to the public? That is something that will be developed through the public realm study. So yes, the public realm study is essential.
As part of that, we spent a good deal of time talking about what the neighborhoods desire in terms of venues, trails, horseback riding trails, barns, all of those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And yet, those community needs and how it integrates with the existing parks, or whether the parks will have the opportunity to become in part of the campus. Where does that, I don't see it anywhere.
Those are all parts of the public realm study. Those are all parts. The public realm study will really be a very comprehensive look.
And how is that going to work in terms of involving the community? It seems like that's really the critical element that we've spent a lot of time on, and yet I don't see it emphasized very much.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I skipped over that. In our overall work plan, which I believe I presented here, forgive me if I'm remembering incorrectly, but the public realm study is central to the overall development. It's really the last step before we get to horizontal and vertical design. It's where we define our urban design standards and guidelines. It's where we define our public interpretation plan for the overall campus. So it's central to the overall design process, and very central to that study is the public engagement part of it, where we get all of that feedback and incorporate it into the overall plan. So
But you made it sound like it came after all of these other steps.
So there's a certain level of iteration. It probably won't come after, but it certainly needs to be fed by. Because, for example, the parking management study, which is going to be looking, for example, at circulation needs within the campus, both patron circulation and back-of-house circulation. Well, until we have a really clear understanding of that, we can't start to define our public spaces until we know how those public spaces need to be utilized by the patrons and by back-of-house. So it needs to be fed by that parking management study.
And you don't think having the community needs and these public needs feeding the other way is as critical? I understand parking, but we have kind of immediate needs. There's opportunities now in terms of that structure really informing how the horse barns are going to work, or whether the people are going to be able to use the trails, or how the parks are integrated. It just seems like it should be the last thing that's done. It should be
well, it's not that it's
very early stage.
It's not that it's the last thing that's done, but what you're describing is central to the public realm study. And all of these other things need to be, there's a lot of engineering that goes into the parking management study, for example, and the building program refinement, it really needs to be done on a building-by-building basis. And then that information is taken, and as part of the public realm study, it's incorporating all of those things that you're talking about. It's soliciting that feedback and that input from the community on exactly what the community wants. I think that's the platform for doing it as part of that public realm study. And that's why I say it's iterative, because there are aspects of the public realm study that are standalone studies where we need to analyze exactly those uses. We need to analyze how the park space, how the community wants to utilize that park space, that open space, how the community wants to interact with the center. But that's integral to the public realm study. And then you bring in all of these other inputs from these other studies and take all of that together to reach your overall planning and your urban design standards and guidelines. So I think it's central to what you're.
Okay, as long as it's all integrated, it doesn't come after all of it.
No. It needs to be very integrated. And then lastly is the NWC branding competition, which at some point, which we haven't defined yet, we're still figuring out, but we will be going through a branding process for the National Westwood Center. Beyond the circle that has the boot in it at the bottom of the page, there will be a more comprehensive branding process. That's not it.
That's not the final?
Yeah, believe it or not, that's not
It's going to
it.
be filled with water.
All right, any other questions? Yes, sir.
When will the authority actually exist, and are you going to sell bonds until it does exist?
So the city is selling the bonds. The city's Department of Finance is managing that process. They haven't. Thankfully, I'm not involved in the development of the governance structure. End of 2017, is that what they said?
At some point, or sometime in 2017.
Yeah, sometime in
Does
2017.
the authority won't exist until then?
Correct.
Yeah.
When you talk about authority, is that really governance?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the governing authority. Yeah, but the city is floating. Either way, the city
The
is,
authority's gonna hold title to the real estate, right? So when
no,
we're
the
out of
city,
court-
the city is gonna hold
The
title.
city's gonna hold title.
Really?
Because the city is floating the bonds, the city has to own the land. Yeah, and we have to work through with CSU on their property exactly what, what does it look like?
Yeah, right,
Because
the
they
city's
have
not-
money from the
But
state.
it won't be like the stadiums where it's owned with the stadium authority.
No.
In this case, it's real estate.
Well, we don't know that yet. The city has hired AECOM and Steve Kaplan to do some work on options. A lot of it will also be to look at tax treatments, and some authorities are created, like the Denver Union Station Public Authority was really created as a financial authority, not a governance authority. Everybody always thinks it's governance. It's not governance. They don't decide anything on Denver Union Station other than the way the deal was built. It was financing because of the way they do it. The stadium district was different because 7 counties came together, so there's 7 county representation in all the stadium districts. And the hotel authority, for example, which owns the Hyatt downtown, is also done because of tax and financing. So it really depends on it. This is intended to be more of a governance structure, but we may find that there's some limitations that can't be done. So we made it very clear when we were campaigning that the city and county of Denver, you can't ask voters to invest $600+ million and not have them have title to the property. So that's an issue.
But the CSU may end up with title to their facility.
Yeah, right. CSU has to own title to their facility, but they may be on a long-term ground lease.
Ground lease, right.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to figure all of that out.
Gotcha.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Barb?
All right. You guys are the most patient group. This is incredible.
That's because we're half asleep.
I know. Wake up. All right, I have a couple of handouts. Let me do this. Sorry, I didn't get these to you sooner. And then, have you seen this document? We were trying to remember if we passed this out last time. I don't think you have, so that's why I brought it today. We're having our own. Pass those out. Okay. All right, well, I'm here to talk about historic resources implementation. I think last time we spoke about this, it was maybe 3 or 4 meetings ago, and I went over the whole work plan, the whole approach to historic resources at National Western. And for those of you who were there, we passed out a big tabloid, kind of ugly spreadsheet thing. And so what we're talking about now today is phase 1 specifically, because we have consultants on board and we're kicking off phase 1 of this work. And so we'll look at this document first. It's kind of a summary sheet for phase 1. And really it takes the first steps toward implementing the vision that's laid out in the master plan to honor and interpret the history of the site. And I think it's important to point out that the master plan gives very clear guidance on how we should be approaching historic resources on this site. And that guidance was developed by really smart people about historic resources. So History Colorado, Historic Denver, and Denver's landmark preservation staff in the Community Planning and Development Department. And some of you may have stood on those committees as well, but we are essentially just implementing that guidance. And the guidance is written in Appendix G of the master plan. So what we've done is worked out how do we phase this work and how do we combine pieces of it and get consultants on board to do the work. So phase 1 is the first steps, and what we're doing is documenting a comprehensive history of the site. And there's really we're capturing the physical and historic evolution of the site over the past 10,000 years. Now, a large focus will be over recent history in the past 110 years, but we are, and this comes from guidance from the master plan, we're also looking at the prehistory of the site and working with Denver Museum of Nature and Science and History Colorado and CSU and their archaeologists on that piece. There's 3 main themes of this documented comprehensive history that we're looking at. It's how the site, the Western and cultural heritage of the site,
the historical ties to agriculture and the meatpacking industry, and then the historical relationship with surrounding communities. And that will result in a document that has photos and timelines and is generally very reader-friendly. And that document will inform the robust public interpretation plan that will lead to which will inform the public realm study. So the idea is that when someone's visiting the site, it's very easy for them to connect with the site's history, to interact with it, to be educated about it. Second piece of this is is landmark nominations for 3 structures on site: the 1909 Stadium Arena, the Livestock Exchange Building, and the Armour & Company Meatpacking Plant Office. And of these 3, the designation for the 1909 Stadium Arena is the one that we're working on first, because as Eric mentioned, there's a lot of studies that need to happen regarding that building and the future reuse of it. We need to understand its structural integrity, and the economic feasibility of reusing that building as a public market, which was the vision laid out in the master plan. There's a lot of funding opportunities out there for historic landmarks, and in order to access those funding opportunities, such as the State Historic Fund, we need to have the building landmarked. And so we'll be seeking a local landmark first, and that's happening very soon after the holidays, and so I'm going to go through a detailed schedule with you so you have an understanding of what that process looks like and how you can get involved in that. The third piece is a condition and structural assessment of a lot of the historic features on the site. So these features are things like the water tower, or the stockyards, or the sign that says "in the yards," and looking at what's the structural integrity of these features and how might they be reused in the redeveloped National Western Center.
Question.
Yes.
What if they're deemed insufficiently structured and sound?
That's a good question. We don't anticipate that happening with any of these, just based on, and are you talking about the buildings or the features?
The features, yeah.
The features. We don't anticipate that happening based on what we're hearing from our consultants so far, but do you have a specific one that you're interested in?
All of them.
All of them.
All of them. The stockyards is not one of them because they're going to be gone anyway, right? You're going to replace those with them.
The intention is for some of them to be saved and incorporated into the redeveloped site. To some extent, and we don't know how yet.
Since we have the former, we have the former SHPO, State Historic Preservation Officer, weigh in here.
Yeah, careful here. No, I think as we look at that, and as you look at that, while they may not be held as pins, they won't be, that material can be reused and is planned to be reused throughout the site in a number of different ways. So it won't, the pins will come down, but that material will be incorporated. Yes.
Okay.
Kind of similar to what's above your head.
Okay.
Exactly. Good question.
Barb,
yes.
the armor, the office building, that's privately owned, correct?
Yes. A couple of these are privately owned, and we will be working very closely with those property owners through this process. Right now, our intention is to take the 1909 Stadium Arena designation through to completion. But with the other applications, at this point, what we've done is scoped our consultants to create draft applications. And so those applications won't be submitted for nominating these buildings until we're at a point with the property owners that everybody's comfortable with that.
I mean, is that, I guess the last time I heard anything, I don't want anything to do with certain regulations, just want to keep the building left alone. So is he on the condemnation, on the acquisition list?
So we're in negotiations with Tom Anthony on the acquisition of his property. And Federal's building is not on our acquisition schedule.
No, I understand what's going on with Federal.
And we'll work with the owners as much as they would like to. If at the end of the day Fred decides he does not want to designate his building, it is his building, it is his choice.
Okay.
I'd like to point out, all 3 buildings are privately owned because the Stadium Arena is owned by the National Western.
The building itself is owned by the city, the land is owned by National Western, and then the National Western operates it, from our understanding.
And based on that 1989 bond issue. After that bond issue was paid off, then it was deeded back to the...
Right, and that bond issue has been paid off, so it's deeded back to the stock show, so.
Okay, so there's discrepancy
then-
about who owns the 1909.
Well, according to records, let me get this right. National Western owns the land, and the city owns the building. But
These buildings were deeded back to the city as...
Insurance for the bond issue that's already been retired.
As collateral. But after the bond is paid off, then the building ownership goes back to National Western.
Well, the 89 bond issue has been phased off.
Okay, so we just have to get updated records then.
I mean, at some point when the transfer happens, at some point, and all this happens, once the authority gets created or whatever, that's different, but I just want to make sure that.
Right, no, that's great clarification, because we were working under a different assumption. But regardless, we're working very closely with National Western on this as well. Teammates for this work, we're working very closely with our partners, both in the city and National Western, History Colorado, Denver Museum of Nature Science, Colorado State University, and Historic Denver. Our consultants are Dill Historians and Atkins Global. And Atkins is working on historic work for I-70, and so is Dill. So they're very familiar with all the records in the area. On the back here, you have just an overview of the schedule, and then how this first phase, which is these 3 components, fit into the 5 phases that we put together and how to address this overall. So phase 2 is looking specifically at the 1909 Stadium Arena, a historic structure assessment and economic feasibility study. Phase 3 gets into the public interpretation plan that Eric mentioned. Phase 4 looks at historic structure assessments for the other 2 historic buildings, the Livestock Exchange and the Armor and Company building. And then phase 5 gets into the Coliseum reuse study. Just wanted to mention that there's some other recommendations that came out of the master plan related to the neighborhoods that are being addressed as well. The Neighborhood Historic Resource Surveys is taking place through Historic Denver's Discover Denver program. That's ongoing. And then there have been a number of creative media strategies that came out through PBS and National Western and Judy Montero's office have all taken on these kind of creative strategies to get the word out and do some publicity about the history of these neighborhoods in this site.
That's at the Denver Public Library. Yeah.
Which one?
The one that you just referred to.
PBS?
That's the last one, yeah.
I'm not sure.
One's on Channel 8?
Yes, that's
and
the one I was
the
referring
other
to.
Stuff is at the library.
Yes, I imagine there's a lot there as
It's
well.
quite extensive, too.
Yeah. So just a couple of important dates that I want to make sure you're aware of. This is a pretty detailed schedule, but the 1909 Stadium Arena landmark designation, well, first of all, we're trying to apply for a state historic fund grant, which the deadline for that is April 1st. And in order to qualify for that grant, to do further study on the 1909, it needs to be designated as a landmark. And so the application will go into the Landmark Preservation Commission on February 12th. And that opens up a public process or a public review process. It triggers notification to RNOs. There will be signs placed on the building, and the public will have 1 month to review the application. Then there will be a public hearing at the Landmark Preservation Commission on March 15th. We'd love to have you guys show your support for this at the public hearing. And then ultimately that designation will go through City Council, through the Plan Committee at City Council, and ultimately have a public hearing on April 18th is the projected date for that.
Barb, I have a couple of questions, or a couple of observations. There is no RNOs in this area, so triggering an RNO is
Not true.
not true. So I am concerned that we, first of all, I think it would be appropriate if this committee got the draft of the application as final as you can get it as soon as possible. And since there are no RNO, I mean, the RNOs that will get triggered are RNOs that are not really in this area.
Well, there's two RNOs. There's United Community Action Network and Global Cares, but RNOs are never sufficient to reach, no matter what
Right.
neighborhood you're in. So I think the safe assumption should be let's reach all 10,000 people, and the RNOs are not going to be sufficient to do that anywhere in Denver.
So I think we need to, I mean, we'll disseminate what we can and whatever the link or whatever is, but I think that would be important. As you know, we attended the LPC meeting, and we were concerned about their lack of understanding of a community process that had been going on. So I don't know if it's possible, but I think if the LPC is going to have a tour of the area, I think we ought to be notified of that. And I think if any members of the committee want to attend that tour, I think that would be really important.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Because I think Peter talked to you. I mean, I think we sent you the memo that we covered, that I was just concerned that there wasn't a lot of context of what had been going on and what, and the chairman wanted to go get somebody involved that I think has been before us, but I don't think he was aware of any of the committee or anything like that. So I think those would be my two requests, that be able to do that, because I just didn't get a feel that the LPC had very much of a context of what has been going on in the community.
Those are really good points. We will be, before this comes to LPC, we, NDCC, will be giving them an update, an official update on all this work and the overall approach to historic preservation, and that's on January 5th. We will be sure to mention the CAC and the public outreach process. If you all want to have involvement in that, we can incorporate that as well. And then we'll work with you on the tour. The tour is scheduled right now for the last week of February. We don't have a date yet, but we'll work with you and making sure to have folks on the tour. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think if you think the application is going to be pretty, since we meet the last Thursday of the month, if you've got an application that's going to be pretty, it'd be helpful to bring it up here and give us an update on that, so that'd be good.
Yeah, and so on this CAC briefing, the first line, I didn't put the CAC briefings on everyone, but I do have a note here that we anticipate briefing you all every month as this work goes on.
Great.
And if we get funding from the state, we anticipate phase 2 following pretty quickly after phase 1. So this is going to be, it'll be a busy year in 2016 for this work.
Great.
So we'll just keep you informed, and if you ever have any questions, feel free to contact me or Eric. And we're working very closely with the landmark preservation groups in CPD. They are really the experts on the historic side of this, and I'm kind of tasked with keeping the ball moving forward. So I rely on them, and of course Historic Denver and History Colorado for their expertise on the historic side.
Great.
Barb, you've got a partnership already established with the State Historic Fund. You're working with one of the individuals in there.
Yes, Cynthia.
Because that designation for landmark is not necessarily going to impede that process. You just need to be using that in.
Okay, that's good to know.
I think you can move it out.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. That
Any
helps
other
us a lot,
questions?
actually.
Any other questions? Great.
All right, thank you.
Next one is a debrief from a smart deal for Denver. We won. What we'll do for the next meeting, because we should have really brought up a PowerPoint to do this, we have done some preliminary analysis. I think there's a couple of most important things you need to know. Number one, there isn't a precinct in the city and county of Denver that we lost, so we won all 346 precincts, which is pretty amazing. So yay.
How unusual is that?
Pretty unusual. When I went to the Board of Governors of CSU last Friday, because they wanted me to give an update because it's their last Board of Governors meeting of the year, a couple of them were pretty stunned. Whatever. There is no councilmanic district in the city that we did not win over 60%. Councilman Brooks's district clearly was the winner of the most generated percentage. His district voted 74.9% in favor of this. Right, and the second closest was Councilman Hurden's district, which voted in, I think it's 72% or 71%. We'll bring you a PowerPoint next time because we'll give you the thing. Most of the precincts around the site voted north of 75 and 80%. We have 2 precincts around the site who voted like at 80%. So if anybody ever, I pointed out to the Board of Governors last Friday that if anybody ever had any questions as to whether the neighbors wanted this or not, all they needed to look was the color-coded map. Right. Because the color-coded map tells you very, very clearly, you know, how they voted. I think it's also important to know that we had 124,000 people vote, which is 2,000 more than we thought they were going to vote. What was most interesting is that 37% of the votes came in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
And that's pretty unusual for a percentage.
That was pretty, we were very surprised at that. So 1/3 of the votes came in the last 24 hours.
Larimer had a lot to do with it.
Huh?
Larimer had a lot to do with it.
Larimer had to do with it. Yes, Larimer was spectacular.
He was.
I have a
so-
special presentation in connection with this too before Betty leaves.
Okay,
Because I want her to get one for sure.
okay.
And of course Drew too. For those of you that knew Phyllis and John were the face of, and the Larimer the steer were the face of one of our best pieces of literature. And Phyllis.
You got the wrong end of the steer there.
I know. But Phyllis's husband, Mario, has made us magnets. Go ahead and pass these around. And so I only have 24 right now, so I don't know if I have enough, but sorry. Yeah, but we've got several thousand for, yeah, if you're, well, I don't know if I've scavenged them. But anyway, this was transformative. And one favor I'd ask Maria, with respect to all of our politicians in each of the districts, I just want to say, I don't like using the possessive term, that this is not just Albus Brooks or anybody's particular district, because the National Western Center is our neighbor, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just asking, because it was an amazing thing to see out there how this campaign worked, and Maria's team that put together the campaign group knew what they were doing, and it was really something. So anyway, just enjoy it. If you guys want more.
That's great. That's terrific. That's a great thing. Yeah. So we'll bring you a color-coded map and all that stuff. We will also give you the comparisons of. I mean, clearly this area overwhelmingly voted, but you know, the other thing that was sweet for me is that we learned a lot in pulling the numbers. Is there was no difference between Democrats and Republicans. There was no political divide on this issue. Republicans voted just as much for it. Huh?
There's a lot of difference between us.
Yes, there is. But on this vote, it was really very straightforward.
I think the fascinating thing for me was how close this came to what had been polled going up to it and what we had seen and the expectation going into it. The results were so close.
The last poll we did, our pollster said we were going to win 65-35, and we won 65-35. So 65 point something to 35. Yeah, he was on the money. He was on the money.
Ray, can you just briefly comment on what sort of the focus of the opposition was, and why they were opposed?
There were. There will always be, our theory has always been that there's always between 18 to 28% of the people who always oppose everything. I think if you were to go back and roll it out, I think some people were uncomfortable with the debt amount, that was a lot of debt. I think the other one that I think others were uncomfortable with was no sunset. The lack of sunset. There's no end date for the tax.
I'd question the Democratic and Republican numbers, though. I think Democrats voted more for it than Republicans.
Oh, I'm sure they did, but the fact that we didn't lose a single precinct in the city tells you that there was no political divide, unlike other people. Yeah. Like the other issues depended more on Democratic voter turnout than ours. We were just across the board. It's pretty spectacular when you look at the map.
That scared the hell out of me. When Mayor Wellington lived, got shot down, and we
right.
Can you tell the party lines from the statistics you can pull out?
I will.
Can that be part of the analysis?
We can tell you how many Democrats voted, how many Republicans voted.
But not how.
No.
No.
But, once you see the array of the map and the distribution, the only people we were running, in our polling, the only people who we were losing, and it was really close by 2 or 3 points, was Republican males over the age of 65. And that was we were only behind by 2 or 3 points. So Larry's group, so anyway, it was, so we'll bring that, it's a color-coded map. Actually, what we'll do is we'll bring it and then we'll all give you copies of it so you can see it because it's pretty spectacular. So thank you for all that you guys did because it was important.
Thank you.
All right, we are losing people because we've been at it. Huh?
Is it 7:30?
It's believe it or not, 7:10.
Okay.
Brainstorming for future issues or topics. Clearly, Eric will have to coordinate where we're going to put the transportation stuff for next time. If we can do that. And will you guys take responsibility for getting her lined up and then letting us know? I think that's important. What other issues do you guys want to talk about? The one outstanding issue that, and I don't know how this coordinates with the public realm study or whatever, we had said a long, long time ago, you guys had expressed a big interest in having somebody to talk to you about the pros and cons of open space designation and park designation. Because this area is going to have a lot of open space, but it's different to have park designation because we talked about the fact that once you designate something as a park, there are certain things you can't do. And once a park is designated as a dedicated park, the only way you could undesignate it is to have a vote of the people citywide.
Hey, you're talking about the National Western Campus.
Center, right.
But only.
Yeah.
Correct.
Not west of the river.
Not west
Okay,
of the river,
good.
not west of the river.
Good.
But you guys had expressed that, but so I don't know whether that's something that still people want to hear about, because we need to talk to Parks and the city attorney's office.
The reason I would like to go into it is because I think we can, through the wisdom of the people you can bring in, get some help linking how we could leverage the National Western Center programming and et cetera with supporting the parks in Elyria, Swansea, and Globeville for developing more streams of revenue, frankly. Dream on maybe, but I feel like I'm completely mystified how you preserve the land in perpetuity while you leave some programming freedom so that you can keep it flexible but then hit standards where it still feels like parks. And I really want us to continually try to leverage resources in the interior of the Global Elyria Swansea neighborhoods for the parks and with the National Western Center as a leveraging partner. I have no idea where those points of relevance are in this, but I think that's part of what.
Well, I think there, particularly if you're talking about any kind of revenue activity, I mean that's the real rub is that there are limitations what you can do in designated parks.
Okay, so it is relevant to what.
It is relevant.
Okay, so then
It is relevant.
I'm in favor of.
Okay.
Maybe sooner you know that, program committee, for example, as you say, it depends on, you can block certain revenue opportunities if you aren't careful on how you.
Yeah, I actually had somebody in Park Hill during the campaign say to me, I can't wait for this to pass because then you'll get the hell out of City Park and everything will be over there. Because there's a certain view, like some of the festivals that David wants to have, some parts of the city don't want to have them, right? And there are some limitations what you can do, to be able to.
Park, you mean go to the Parks Department of the city?
Yes, if you make it a
Another
park,
issue to think about.
if you make it a park, it's a park department of the city, but there are some parks that are not officially designated, but when people, I think it's important for all of us to be conversant about what the vernacular is.
Right.
Because a designated park has a lot of great advantages, but also has some equally big disadvantages too.
I just want to make sure we don't put any spin on it and have various sides to really get a depth of understanding.
Right.
That's all, because it's
Right, so we'll get I don't know if we'll get it all done through January, but at least by February we'll have it done. John?
Not really important time-wise, but one of the first things to be constructed, I believe, is going to be the bridges. Is that not?
I'm looking, I can't turn my back.
Pretty close.
Bridges.
The first phase?
Yeah, the first phase of
Yeah,
construction,
first phase
because, you know, there's no need for acquisition or very little. And I've had some concern. And again, I think that we can take this as a wonderful opportunity and not just have another bridge. You know, I think we have to design.
I'm sorry, but just a bridge over the river. Sorry, go ahead. Just, you know what it is. Not just having a bridge, I apologize.
We just have to make sure that the two bridges reflect or incorporate the whole spirit. The neighborhoods, the National Western. We just don't want another damn road going across the river, you know. We want, and before Public Works get their resume of bridge designs that they keep on file, we want to have some input into that, you know.
John, we couldn't agree with you more. And that's, we'll be doing all that in the public realm study, is really defining the character and like the aesthetic that we're going for, and you will be very involved in that.
Well, 2 years from now, I hope we're still in agreement then. Okay.
We will.
All right, any other issues that we have not talked about that we need to, I mean, obviously, we're gonna start lining this up with Kelly and Eric's work plan, and in terms, so we stay ahead of stuff. But anything else that we need?
2016 budgets.
Okay.
About time to see that. We hear all the talk, but we're not seeing the budgets.
And also, I requested, and it's been granted, that there be a hard copy, loose leaf notebook of all three committees, the Executive Oversight Committee, the Financial, and the Programming Committee, with all of the the handouts and everything put together. And gratefully, Tricia Ortega over at NDCC is doing that for us, and we're probably talking about expanding the kiosk over at the Valdez Perry Library, and we can have conversations about what to get translated. So we can create in the neighborhoods a hard copy access for some of this stuff. So I'd like us to kind of evaluate in the course of things how we can enrich that. So.
Okay. Yeah, trains we have to relocate. We also remind everybody that we can't meet here next month. So where do you guys want to meet?
Didn't we meet at Focus the last time?
Denver Museum of Nature and Science. We've never met there.
You want to go that far?
That's hell parking down there.
No, Museum of Nature and
Oh,
Science.
no, I'm sorry.
Denver Museum, not downtown, yeah.
No, okay.
We never have met there. I mean, I'd love
It's
to.
still hell parking.
They have a big parking.
Does you guys want to drive that far?
Where's that?
The Museum of Nature and Science, that's
That's
City
if
Park.
it's too far.
Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah. We will do that.
Could we set with a remote line over there and we'll get it focused?
I'm not interested if it's just, you know, let people enjoy it. That's the whole, I just want to get people, it doesn't matter, it's a suggestion,
No,
it's no big deal.
All right, we'll check it out, but just remember we can't do that. All right, anything else?
What is the date of next year's meeting?
Last Thursday.
I'm glad you came by.
Good question. Let me see. Hey.
How are you?
Hold on, David, I'm looking.
Going to Cuba for Christmas?
I am not going to Cuba for Christmas, David. You just died to go to Cuba. He wants to go be Hemingway. He wants to go be Papa Hemingway.
How about the next meeting there?
Ryan, don't call him the beach. We're gonna roll.
Thursday, January 28th, guys.